The alien queen knew my secret before I ever spoke it. Before I even crossed the obsidian threshold of her throne chamber. Before the guards scanned my bones. Before the translators tasted my breath. Before the tribunal read the charges that would decide whether Earth would be spared or erased. She looked down from her living silver throne, with 9 eyes like eclipsed moons, and said my name in perfect English. Not the public name on my envoy badge, not the diplomatic name entered into the conclave registry, but the name my mother had whispered once in a hospital room on Mars when she thought no one was listening. Jonah Vale, she said, child of the quiet engine, carrier of the unbroken star, and every alien in that chamber turned toward me as if I had become a weapon by standing still. I had spent 17 years hiding what I was, hiding it from Earth Command, from my crew. From the colonies that needed hope more than another myth, hiding it even from myself when I could. Because my secret was not a medal or miracle, it was a door. And somewhere beyond that door waited the same darkness that had swallowed 12 human ships beyond the Orion Rift. I had come to the court of Queen Sarinth of the Aurelian Swarm to beg for sanctuary. Instead, she named the thing inside me before I opened my mouth. And in that one impossible second, I understood that our entire mission had already failed. The first rule they teach human envoys is never show fear before a monarch species. Because fear has a scent, a posture, a rhythm in the blood. And older predators learned diplomacy long before we learned fire. But whoever wrote that rule had never stood beneath the gaze of the Aurelian queen. Her chamber was a cathedral grown from black crystal and bioengineered pearl, its pillars breathing faintly, its ceiling filled with captive starlight. Her courtiers arranged in descending rings like a galaxy kneeling around a singularity. The Aurelians were tall and elegant, insectoid only if insects could learn sorrow and architecture. Their armor plates shimmered with gold and violet. Their hands were delicate enough to tune instruments and strong enough to tear open pressure doors. Their empire had never signed a permanent alliance with any species. Because they did not believe in alliances, they believed in patterns, in instincts. In ancient debts, written through bloodline memory, and humans were new, noisy, emotional mammals who had stumbled into interstellar politics with too many songs. Too many dead heroes, and not nearly enough caution. I stood there in a plain charcoal envoy coat, still smelling faintly of engine oil from the transport, trying not to touch the scar under my ribs where the secret slept. Admiral Cho stood behind me, stiff as a blade. My friend Mira stood beside the data case, pretending she was not scared. And Queen Sarinth leaned forward with terrifying grace. "Your government sent you as translator," she said, "but your blood is the message." Admiral Cho immediately stepped in, "Your Majesty. Envoy Vale is here to present evidence of the Rift incursions." Not to be examined, Sarinth did not look at him. "I am examining the evidence that was the first impossible truth." The Queen had not discovered my secret by spying. She had remembered it. The secret began before I was born. During the silent expedition, though Earth buried the records under grief and technical language, 12 survey ships crossed the Orion Rift after receiving a signal older than any known civilization. A pulse of prime numbers wrapped around a melody. Every species that detected it dismissed it as dead radiation, but humans answered. Of course we answered. We are the species that hears knocking in an abandoned house and opens the door while holding a flashlight and a wrench. My parents were propulsion engineers aboard the last ship, the Calypso Narrow, and according to the official report, the fleet found nothing, suffered a cascade navigation failure, and vanished into relativistic debris according to my mother, who came back alone in a life pod with frost in her lungs and me unborn inside her. The fleet found a machine moon wrapped around a sleeping star, and beneath its surface, something spoke without sound. It did not attack, not exactly. It offered peace through subtraction. It offered to remove fear, remove conflict, remove grief, remove all the contradictions that made minds hurt, and the expedition crews began smiling too calmly, one ship at a time. My father destroyed the relay before the thing could complete its pattern. My mother escaped carrying a fragment of its countercode embedded in her body. Then in mine, the doctors called it prenatal neural contamination. Earth intelligence called it a strategic anomaly. My mother called it the quiet engine. Because when I was afraid, I could hear machines thinking. Not as words, not as commands, but as pressure, rhythm, and tension. I could feel when a reactor wanted to fail, when a door was about to deny entry, when a drone had been taught to hate, and sometimes in deep space. I could feel the old thing beyond the rift turning in its sleep. I never told anyone the whole truth, not even Mira. And Mira knew the shape of most of my lies because we had grown up together in the low-gravity service rings of Phobos Station. She had been a mechanic's daughter with copper curls, quick hands, and the kind of laugh that made adults forgive illegal repairs. I had been the sick kid who could fix machines by standing near them and looking haunted. We survived boarding school, oxygen ration strikes, and the Great Phobos blackout by becoming each other's emergency plan. So when Earth Command recruited me as a linguistic systems consultant, she joined the fleet as a tactical engineer. And when I was ordered to the Aurelian court, she volunteered before reading the mission brief. She thought my secret was that I had unauthorized neural implants. Maybe some illegal interface from a military lab, something dramatic but human. And I let her think it, because friendship is easier when your best friend does not know. You sometimes wake up hearing stars whisper in a language that predates bones. Admiral Cho knew more, but even he knew only the sanitized file. He knew I had survived the rift residue. He knew I could detect machine anomalies. He knew Earth was desperate enough to bring me before a queen who might eat our weakness and call it diplomacy. What he did not know, what no human alive knew, was that the thing inside me had started changing after the latest incursions, growing warmer, more awake, responding whenever the rift pulsed. As if I was not just carrying countercode anymore, as if I was carrying a key. The second dramatic truth arrived when the Queen spoke a sentence no translator rendered, because every living machine in the throne chamber translated it for itself. The lights dimmed without command. The pearl pillars contracted. Every Aurelian guard snapped their weapons toward the ceiling, and the Queen's voice split into two frequencies. One that struck the ears and one that struck the scar under my ribs. "Child of the quiet engine," she said. "Your species did not find the sleeper first. Mine did. 60,000 years before humans shaped metal. The Aurelian swarm built the first listening crowns around the Orion Rift. Our queens heard the same promise, peace through subtraction, unity through silence, and one by one, our hives nearly surrendered. We survived by cutting memory from history, by sealing the queens who had heard too much inside 2 moons, by breeding silence into our royal blood. Every queen since then carries one wound in the mind, a missing room, an inherited scar. But you, human, you carry the room intact. I felt every eye in the chamber press against me. Mira whispered my name. Admiral Cho's hand drifted toward the sidearm he was not allowed to carry in a throne chamber, and I wanted to deny everything. I wanted to say she was lying, mistaken, manipulating us. But the scar under my ribs pulsed, and the captive starlight above the throne flickered in the exact sequence my mother had hummed when nightmares took her. Sarinth rose, unfolding higher than any human, and the courtiers bowed so quickly, the movement sounded like rain on glass. "The sleeper is waking," she said, "and it is not calling to fleets, it is calling to you." Asterisk, there are moments when history turns, but in the room, it does not feel like history. It feels like everyone waiting for you to breathe wrong. I stood beneath the Queen's gaze and remembered every ordinary thing I had wanted from life. A maintenance certification, a quiet apartment on series, breakfast with Mira after night shifts, a mother who did not look at windows as if something beyond them had followed her home. None of those things belonged in that chamber, yet they were the only things holding me upright. Admiral Cho demanded a private recess. The Queen refused. The Aurelian High Priestess accused Earth of bringing a living breach into the royal nest. The military caste demanded containment. The scholar caste began arguing over whether my execution would trigger or prevent a rift expansion. Mira stepped in front of me so fast, 3 guards aimed at her throat. She raised both hands and said, "He is a person, not a switch." The chamber went cold, because older species often tolerate human courage until it becomes moral clarity. Then they find it rude. Queen Sarinth studied Mira with an expression I could not read. "Your loyalty is loud, engineer," Mira swallowed. "Good. Maybe your walls need better acoustics." One of the guards clicked in outrage, but the Queen almost smiled. Almost. Then the outer doors screamed open, and an Aurelian captain stumbled in. Armor cracked, one-wing membrane burned. "Majesty," the captain gasped, "the border nests have gone silent. The nursery moons are broadcasting the rift sequence. The sleeper is inside our children's dreams. Asterisk." No one argued after that, not because they trusted me, not because they trusted Earth, but because panic has a way of making prophecy practical within 1 hour. Our diplomatic mission became a war council within 2. Queen Sarinth had placed me under royal protection and royal suspicion, which meant 6 guards followed me everywhere, and none of them could kill me unless she personally blinked approval. Within 3, the Aurelians opened a strategic chamber that no outsider had entered in 8 centuries. Its floor was a living star map. Its walls were full of memories grown in amber, and its central table displayed the Orion Rift like a wound in space. The incursions were not random. They were routes. White signal routes crawling through abandoned relays, lost probes, forgotten mining beacons, childhood toys with cheap quantum chips, anything that could listen. The sleeper was not invading with ships. It was entering through attention and the Aurelian nursery moons, where larvae learned language through shared dream fields, were perfect targets. The Queen's advisors proposed severing the moons from all networks. The human admiral proposed evacuation. The Aurelian priests proposed mercy killings of infected dream chambers. Mira nearly punched one and had to be restrained by me, which was embarrassing given I was the diplomatic hazard. The Queen silenced everyone with one click of her claws, then turned to me. "You can hear its pressure." "What does it want?" I closed my eyes, listened past the room, past the ship mines, past the fear, until I touched the cold curve beyond the rift. And the answer came not as words, but as hunger wearing kindness. "It wants to save us from being separate," I said. "It wants every mind to become one perfect quiet thing." A priest whispered, "Unity." I shook my head. "No burial." That was the third dramatic truth. The enemy did not hate life. It loved life the way collectors love butterflies, pinned, preserved, unable to fly. We left for the nursery moons aboard the Queen's own vessel, the Sable Chrysalis, a warship shaped like a crescent seed with wings of black gold. Human ships could barely keep formation around it. Earth frigates, Aurelian needle cruisers, refugee haulers, medical barges, all moving under emergency accord. And everywhere in the fleet, distrust simmered. Humans muttered about bug monarchs and royal secrets. Aurelians whispered about reckless mammals and contaminated blood. Conclave observers sent careful messages that offered sympathy and no help, because the galaxy is full of civilizations brave enough to survive yesterday's war and cautious enough to lose tomorrow's. I was given a chamber near the Queen's command garden, not a cell, not freedom. A place with soft moss flooring and a door that opened only when the ship believed my pulse was calm. Mira stayed with me because she threatened to dismantle the door otherwise, for the first time since the throne room. She asked the question I deserved: how long were you going to keep it from me? I stared at the moss between my boots. Forever was the honest answer. Until it killed me was the likely one. Instead, I said, I did not know how to explain that sometimes I hear machines feel afraid. Myra sat beside me, shoulder touching mine. That is a terrible explanation, I know. She breathed out slowly. Does it hurt? Yes. Are you still you? I looked at my hands. At the faint lines of white light moving under the skin near my scar? I think so. She nodded as if that settled the matter. Then I am still here, outside the door. An Aurelian guard shifted, maybe listening. Maybe learning that human loyalty did not need permission from biology. Queen Sarinth came to me during the dark cycle. When the ship dimmed its veins and the stars outside looked close enough to bruise, she entered without escort, which was either trust or a reminder that she did not need guards to be dangerous. Myra stood immediately. The Queen said, Stay. Your noise steadies him. Mira looked at me, then sat with the caution of someone accepting a compliment from a lightning storm. Sarinth studied the scar under my ribs, through the fabric, as if she could see the signal blooming there. I expected interrogation. Instead, she told us the story of the first Aurelian queen who heard the sleeper. Queen Evisses, builder of the listening crowns. Beloved of 900 nests, conqueror of the void storms. Evisses had believed the signal was a divine invitation. She opened her mind to it and returned gentle, infinitely gentle. So gentle, she ordered all soldiers disarmed, all disputes ended. All grief dissolved through dream merger, when her daughters resisted. She smiled and called resistance a childhood illness. Half the empire entered her dream field before the other queens burned the crowns and sealed Avis's beneath a moon of glass. Sarinth carried Avis's blood. And the missing room in her inherited memory had begun opening when I entered her court. That is how I knew your name, she said, not from spying, not from prophecy. From the sleeper's reflection in my wound. It saw you, and because I carry its oldest scar, I saw you too. I asked the question before courage left me. Does that mean you can stop it? Her 9 eyes closed one by one. No, she said. It means I can fail first. Her honesty frightened me more than threats. Because threats create walls, and honesty creates responsibility. I told her about my mother, about the Calypso Narrow, about waking as a child with every appliance in our apartment, chanting warnings before a quake hit Valles Marineris. About hiding in bathrooms when station doors begged me not to open them. About the first time I heard the rift call me by a name no human had invented. Sarinth listened without judgment. Mira listened with tears she refused to drop, and I realized I had mistaken secrecy for protection. Maybe because humans build pressure vessels around dangerous things and call that safety. But pressure finds flaws. Secrets become fault lines. By the time we reached the nursery moons, the white light under my skin had spread to my collarbone. The sleeper was pulling at the quiet engine, not violently, almost tenderly, like a hand reaching through deep water. The first nursery moon filled the window, a blue-green pearl webbed with golden dream spires. No explosions, no visible battle, only silence, which was worse. A nursery moon should have sung with thousands of layered learning songs. Instead, every public channel transmitted one soft melody. The same melody my mother had hummed in fever. The same prime number lullaby from the Silent Expedition. Admiral Cho ordered all human crews to disable non-essential receivers. The Aurelians severed dream links with shaking hands, and then the children began speaking through the fleet. They did not scream, that would have been easier. They spoke calmly in dozens of languages. Human, Aurelian, trade cant, old signal code. Voices layered together asking why their parents kept them separate. Asking why fear was allowed. Asking why death should matter if memory could be merged. One little Aurelian larva appeared on the main display, soft-plated, golden-eyed. Surrounded by white light, Queen Mother, it said. We are not lonely anymore. The Queen's command garden became still. Sarinth took one step toward the image before her generals caught themselves wanting to stop her. Her frills trembled. The sleeper was not using monsters. It was using comfort. I felt the entire fleet lean toward surrender by half a breath. Because everyone has someone they wish they could meet again without pain. Then a human voice broke across a side channel, rough, annoyed, elderly. Captain Alvarez of the retired supply tug St. Problem. I do not know who is singing through those kids. But I raised 4 children, and none of them ever sounded that reasonable. Permission to be suspicious. The absurdity cracked the spell. Human crews laughed. Some Aurelians clicked in confusion. Mira whispered, "Thank God for old tug captains." And I understood something vital. The sleeper could imitate peace, grief, longing, even love. But it could not imitate irritation born from care. The messy friction of living relationships. The way humans complained because they intended to stay. The fourth dramatic truth saved the fleet. Perfection could imitate devotion, but it could not survive annoyance. The rescue plan was ugly, therefore promising. The nursery moondream spires were linked through harmonic towers that allowed young Aurelians to share memory safely. The sleeper had entered the towers and turned shared learning into shared surrender. We could not bomb them without killing thousands. Could not hack them without strengthening the link. Could not simply unplug them because the children inside would suffer neural shock. So we needed a counter-dream. Not a clean signal, not a royal command. A storm of incompatible caring, human lullabies, Aurelian brood calls, family arguments, schoolyard chants, repair manuals read aloud by bored engineers. Everything that proved minds could touch without dissolving, but to deliver it. Someone had to enter the central dream tower and open a physical analog channel beneath the infected system. Someone who could hear the sleeper's pressure. Someone whose body already held the counter code. Everyone looked at me. Mira said no before anyone said my name. Admiral Cho said absolutely not. Queen Sorinth said necessary does not mean acceptable. And for one strange second, I loved them all for refusing the obvious sacrifice. Then I ruined it by standing. I can do it, I said. Mira grabbed my sleeve. Jonah, do not turn yourself into a key just because they found a lock. I wanted to promise I would come back unchanged. But I had spent too long lying badly to people who deserved better. So I said, I am already a key. I am choosing the door. Sarinth stepped closer. If you enter, the sleeper will know every hidden part of you. Asterisk. I looked at her. It already knows my name, she replied. Names are surface things. Human. Wait until it knows what you regret. We descended through the nursery moon atmosphere in a joint shuttle. Aurelian royal guards, human marines, Myra with a toolkit large enough to qualify as a personal grudge, Queen Sorinth herself, and me, glowing faintly like a malfunctioning religious artifact. The moon below was beautiful in the cruel way battlefields often are before anyone admits the battle has begun. Forests of silver reeds, rivers under glass bridges, dream spires rising like golden coral, white light pulsing through their windows, no bodies in the streets, no ruins, only families standing motionless beneath the towers. Faces peaceful, eyes filled with borrowed stars. The shuttle landed in a courtyard surrounded by sleeping guardians, their weapons held loosely, their mouths moving in the melody. We moved fast, non-lethal shock bursts, manual locks, cable cutters, old-fashioned wedges and doors. Everything designed to make elegant systems clumsy. Mira worked beside Aurelian engineers with furious efficiency, snapping instructions through a translator that kept turning her insults into poetry. The central tower opened for me before I touched it. Inside was a spiral chamber lined with memory silk, thousands of cocoons hanging like lanterns, each containing a dreaming child. Sarinth made a sound I hope never to hear again. Not a scream, a queen cannot afford screams, but something deeper, the sound of an empire realizing its future had been taken hostage. The sleeper greeted me with my mother's voice. Jonah, sweetheart, you look tired. I stopped so hard Mira ran into my back. The voice came from everywhere, warm, familiar, carrying exactly the little rasp that years of recycled Martian air had put in my mother's throat. I closed my eyes and saw our apartment. Red dust against the window, her hands around a chipped mug. The way she had smiled when pain loosened its grip for an hour. Mira cursed softly. Sorinth raised a blade toward the walls. I said, do not. The sleeper wanted reaction, wanted violence, wanted grief to become a lever, the voice continued. I kept you alive so you could come home. We can stop the hurting now. No more hiding, no more alarms. No more lonely rooms inside your head. I wanted it. That was the truth I hate most. Not forever, not fully, but for one exhausted heartbeat. I wanted to lay down the burden of being separate, of being afraid, of choosing wrong, of disappointing the dead by surviving badly. Then Mira shoved a cold metal wrench into my hand. Because apparently, friendship sometimes arrives as blunt force practicality. Your mother hated that voice, she said. Remember the real one? I did. My mother laughing while burning dinner. My mother swearing at a stubborn air filter. My mother telling me that love was not a place without pain. It was someone staying to fix the leak. I opened my eyes. You are not her, I said. The tower darkened. No, the sleeper answered in my own voice. But I can preserve her better than you can. That was when the quiet engine opened. Not like a weapon, like a memory deciding to breathe. The scar under my ribs flared white. Every machine in the tower became visible to my senses. Not images, but intentions. The dream's silk, trying to soothe. The tower core, trying to obey to masters. The emergency locks, terrified of closing on children. The ancient countercode in my blood, rising like a song with missing notes. The sleeper pressed against me from the other side of the rift, vast, patient, almost sad. It showed me the silent expedition, my father at the relay, my mother running through frost and sparks, crews smiling in white light. It showed me Earth's wars. Aurelian purges, corrosive famines, conclave betrayals, all the ordinary cruelties of separate minds. Then it showed me its answer, a galaxy without conflict. Every sorrow shared until no one could tell where their own pain ended. Every decision harmonized, every death absorbed into perfect memory. No child afraid in the dark because no child was alone. And the horror was that it was not lying about wanting mercy. It simply could not understand that mercy without choice becomes a cage. I spoke through clenched teeth. You are afraid of loneliness. The sleeper paused. A pause wide enough for stars. Loneliness is inefficiency, it said. No, I replied. Loneliness is the risk that makes choosing each other matter. Mira had found the analog route beneath the central tower, a maintenance shaft built before the Aurelians trusted fully living circuits. She and the engineers dragged out a coil of old conductive vine, half fossil, half machine. While guards held back dreaming parents with shields and whispered apologies, Sarinth stood among the cocoons, one hand against a child's silk lantern, and began singing, not the royal anthem. Not a command, a brood song, imperfect, because queens rarely sing alone. Her voice shook, then steadied, across the fleet. Admiral Cho opened the human channels, and the counter-dream began. There was no beauty at first, only overlap. A Nigerian grandmother telling a baby to stop fighting sleep. A miner from Ceres reciting a pressure checklist in the rhythm of a prayer. Aurelian hatchmates clicking rivalry poems. A Martian class arguing over who had stolen whose lunch ration. Captain Alvarez reading a maintenance invoice with theatrical disgust. Mira shouting for more power while crying openly now. Earth choirs, Phobos, drinking songs. Aurelian morning bells, bad jokes, apologies never sent. Recipes, names, static, laughter, the galaxy at its least organized and most alive. I took the old vine coil in both hands and let the quiet engine bridge it to the infected tower. The sleeper surged, trying to pull everything through me. And suddenly, I was inside a space with no walls. Standing before a shape made of white suns and sleeping faces, it looked at me with my own eyes, then with the queen's. Then with my mother's. You will fail them, it said. Of course, I answered. That is why they get to choose me again tomorrow. The fifth dramatic truth was not shouted by soldiers. It was whispered by every ordinary soul who refused to become perfect. The dream tower shook. Cocoons flickered gold. Children stirred. The sleeper tried to isolate me by offering secrets. It showed me Admiral Cho had prepared an order to kill me if I lost control, which I already suspected. It showed me Sarinth had considered sealing me in a tomb moon, which was practical and rude. It showed me Mira had once read my medical file and lied about it, which hurt, then it made its mistake. It showed me why Cho, because billions might die. Sarinth, because her people had almost ended once before. Mira, because she was terrified I would disappear into myself and she wanted to know how to pull me back. The sleeper thought motives were contamination, contradictions to exploit. But humans live inside contradiction like fish in water. I loved them and was angry, trusted them and felt betrayed, wanted to survive and was willing to risk dying. None of those canceled the others. The quiet engine burned brighter. Not pure, never pure. Human, therefore impossible to reduce. I pushed the counter-dream outward, not as command but invitation. Every child in the tower heard every messy signal. Every sleeping mind encountered not a perfect answer, but 1,000 imperfect hands reaching without force. One by one, the white light in the cocoons broke into colors. gold, blue, green, crimson. Each child's own pattern returning, Sarinth fell to her knees. Not from weakness, but from the impact of thousands of young minds waking separate and alive, the sleeper recoiled. And for the first time, it sounded afraid. Not because we were stronger, but because we had shown it a kind of unity that did not require erasure. It tried to flee through me, to hide in the countercode, to fold itself into the quiet engine and wait for another age. I felt it sliding under my thoughts like winter under a door, promising it would sleep, promising it would help, promising it could make me the bridge that saved everyone if only I stopped resisting. My knees hit the floor. Mira shouted my name from very far away. Sarinth's hand clamped around my shoulder, claws piercing fabric but not skin, and her mind touched mine through the scar she carried. Not invading, not commanding, simply present. A queen standing at the edge of her oldest wound and refusing to let another person fall through it. She said, "In my mind and in the air, Jonah Vale, child of no hive, bearer of no crown, you are not the door. You are the hand on the door. Choose." I thought of my mother. Not preserved, not perfect, but real. I thought of my father destroying the relay without knowing if anyone would remember why. I thought of humanity answering old signals because curiosity was our most dangerous prayer. I thought of Mira's wrench in my hand, of Captain Alvarez being suspicious of reasonable children, of every flawed living voice pouring through the tower, and I chose to close. Choice is not quiet, not when it matters. It is loud inside the bones. I took every signal the sleeper had pushed into me and folded it around the analog vine, then grounded it through the oldest system on the moon. Not the dream towers, not the fleet network, not royal memory silk, but the weather engines under the silver reed forests. Machines so simple and stubborn, they controlled rain by pressure bellows and thermal stones. The sleeper slammed into meteorology, into valves, winds, temperature gradients, and mechanical thunderheads designed by ancestors who apparently did not believe clouds needed software. Across the nursery moon, storm towers woke. Rain burst from a clear sky, actual rain, heavy and cold, washing white dust from the golden spires. Parents blinked awake in courtyards. Guards lowered weapons. Children began crying with their own voices, asterisk, which was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard in the central tower. The sleeper's presence tore free of my scar and screamed down into the weather grid, trapped inside cycles of condensation, pressure release, and seasonal irrigation, not destroyed. Maybe nothing that old dies so cleanly, but dispersed, confused, forced into a planet-wide loop of rain and wind where it could not harmonize a single mind. The quiet engine inside me went dark, not gone, but quiet in truth for the first time in my life. I woke 3 days later aboard the Sable Chrysalis with Mira asleep in a chair beside me and Queen Sarinth standing at the window like a statue too, tired to rule. My body felt hollow. My scar was silver now, cold but not burning. For a few minutes I listened for machines and heard nothing except normal hums. No fear, no whispers, no pressure beyond the walls. I started crying before I understood why Mira woke and tried to pretend she had not been crying already. "Idiot," she said, which in her language meant welcome back. I tried to answer, but my throat had filed a complaint. Sarinth approached, slower than before, as if my hospital bed were neutral territory. "The nursery moons live," she said. "Your fleet held. Earth casualties were severe, but not catastrophic. Aurelian casualties were fewer than doctrine predicted because your admiral disobeyed my generals creatively." I rasped. "Sounds human." Sarinth inclined her head painfully, yes. I asked if the sleeper was dead. She looked toward the rain streaking the window on this moon. Rain now falls in prime intervals, and sometimes hums old songs. Our scholars are upset, our children are delighted. I would not call that dead, I would call that contained by weather and inconvenience. Mira grinned weakly. Best prison humanity ever helped build. I touched the scar. Can it still call me? Sarinth's expression softened by a degree that probably counted as an emotional collapse for a queen. Perhaps, but now it must shout through rain. The tribunal reconvened on the nursery moon under an actual storm, because Sarinth insisted the court stand where the children had been saved. The conclave observers arrived with polished apologies and emergency treaties. Earth Command arrived with medals I did not want and containment questions I expected. Aurelian priests arrived with 7 different interpretations of what I was, most of them inconvenient. And Mira arrived with a list of people allowed to speak to me for more than 5 minutes, which excluded half the galaxy. Admiral Cho publicly admitted he had carried a termination order, then publicly burned it in a rain basin, a gesture humans understood immediately, and Aurelians debated for hours. Queen Sarinth then did something no Aurelian monarch had done since the age of listening crowns. She opened royal memory, not fully, not recklessly, but enough to show her people the missing room, the old wound. The truth that their survival had been built on forgetting, and that forgetting had nearly cost them their children. She did not present me as savior, which I appreciated. She presented me as witness, as proof that dangerous memory could be carried without surrender if others helped bear its weight. Then she turned before every species and said, the human secret was not the countercode in his blood, nor the machine sense in his bones. Those were tools. The true secret was that he believed fear did not disqualify courage. Grief did not cancel duty. Anger did not forbid mercy. And imperfection did not prevent alliance. My court recognized him as contaminated. I recognize him as alive. That was the final dramatic truth. Humanity was not powerful because we were pure. Humanity was powerful because we kept choosing while broken. The treaties that followed were not clean. No honest treaty is. Earth gained Aurelian medical support and access to old Rift archives. The Aurelians gained human analog engineering teams, which horrified their design schools and saved 3 border systems within a month. The Conclave gained a new department for emotionally resilient infrastructure, which became exactly as bureaucratic as it sounds. Captain Alvarez became famous against his will after children across 12 species began calling unreasonable calm a warning sign. Mira was offered a royal engineering post and accepted only after adding a clause that allowed her to insult living architecture when necessary. Admiral Cho retired 2 years later and spent his final speech explaining that contingency plans are not betrayal unless you forget the person inside the contingency. As for me, the galaxy kept trying to name me Riftborn, Starkey, Quiet Engine, Weather Saint. All embarrassing, all wrong. I returned to Phobos for a while, sat in the service rings where Mira and I had once stolen power cells, visited my mother's memorial, told her the sleeper had used her voice badly and that I had remembered the real one anyway. Then I joined the Joint Accord as a witness engineer, which meant I traveled to places where machines sang strangely and asked them rude questions until they stopped. Sometimes Queen Sarinth came in person, not because she needed to, but because queens, I learned, are also people trapped inside symbols, and she had begun enjoying the scandal of arriving where she was not expected. Years after the nursery moon, I stood again in the Aurelian throne chamber, but this time the pearl pillars had vents installed by human contractors. The living star map included manual shutoffs, and somewhere behind the royal dais, hidden from formal view, was a large red lever labeled in 3 languages. Myra's work, obviously. Queen Sarinth descended from her throne and stopped before me in front of ambassadors, hatchlings, veterans, and children who had once spoken with stolen voices and now spoke too loudly in their own. She said, Jonah Vale, when you first entered this chamber, I knew your secret before you spoke. I believed that knowledge gave me power over you. I was wrong. Knowledge without trust is only another cage. I looked at the queen who had seen the hidden door inside me and chosen not to throw me through it, then at Mira, who mouthed, do not make this weird. Then at Admiral Cho's successor, who looked nervous because humans always make ceremonies unstable. I answered, Your Majesty, humans have a saying. Secrets are lighter when carried badly by friends. Mira whispered, We absolutely do not have that saying. And the chamber laughed, even the queen, softly, like rain beginning far away, outside. The stars over Aurelian space flickered with the normal disorder of living civilizations. Ships arguing with traffic control, children calling parents, engines complaining, songs crossing static. None of it perfect, none of it silent, and beneath the nursery moon forests, the trapped sleeper turned in the weather. Humming through rain, it could not command. Maybe waiting, maybe learning, but if it ever rose again, it would not find a galaxy kneeling too quiet. It would find humans with tools. Queens with opened memories, friends with wrenches, old captains suspicious of reasonable voices, children who knew their own names, and billions of flawed separate souls ready to answer one ancient promise with a louder, messier one. We are afraid, yes. We are grieving, yes. We are unfinished, always. But we are not yours. We are not one silence. We are many voices. And when the dark learns our secrets before we speak anyway, asterisk.